April 28, 1945. The garden of the Reich Chancellery is a smoking ruin. Soviet artillery shells scream overhead. The ground shakes with every impact. The smell of sulfur and wet earth hangs thick in the air. Against a bullet-scarred wall stands a man. Hermann Fegelein, 38 years old. His hands are bound. Why is a high-ranking general facing a firing squad of his own men? He is family. But in the bunker, betrayal carries a single price. Just 12 hours ago, Fegelein was untouchable. He was Heinrich Himmler's golden boy. He wore the Knight's Cross around his neck. He held the rank of SS Gruppenführer. He was part of the inner circle. Now, the soldiers rip the epaulets from his tunic. He is stripped of his rank. He is abandoned by every protector he ever had. The visual evidence is stark. In the frame, a man in a dirty uniform, cornered like an animal. The executioners raise their rifles. At first glance, a tragic end to a war hero. But in reality, the liquidation of a monster. The command cuts through the noise of the shelling. A volley of shots cracks. Fegelein's body jerks violently. He crumples into the mud. The opportunist dies in the debris of the regime he helped construct. But this was not just a military execution. Fegelein left a trail of bodies long before Berlin. 17,000 civilians. That was his tally in the marshes of Belarus. He did not fight soldiers there. He murdered women. He drove children into the swamps to drown. He treated genocide as a career path. He was a charming playboy with blood on his hands. He married Gretl Braun solely for access. It made him Hitler's brother-in-law. It was supposed to be his ultimate shield. He believed his connections made him invincible. He was wrong. When the Soviet ring closed around the city, Fegelein did not stand and fight. He ran. He packed diamonds and foreign currency. He changed into civilian clothes. He tried to desert while the city burned. But the Gestapo tracked him down. Events accelerated. Even Eva Braun, his sister-in-law, pleaded for his life. It made no difference. Hitler's rage was absolute. The order stood. The playboy general was dragged to the garden. Thus ended the life of the Reich's most famous opportunist. October 30th, 1906, Ansbach, Bavaria. Hermann Fegelein was born into a world that smelled of leather, hay, and sweat. His father, Hans, was a retired lieutenant who ran an equestrian school in Munich. The boy's life was defined by the stable. He learned to stay in the saddle before he could read a sentence. He grew up fast. He became exceptional at jumping, competing in events across the region. But in the classroom, he was invisible. Grades were poor, attention was absent. He was not destined for a university degree or a high-ranking office job. He was a stable boy, a groom, a jockey. In the rigid hierarchy of pre-war Germany, this was a dead end. He swept the floors and brushed the coats of animals owned by richer men. But fate intervened in his early 20s. While working at his father's school, Fegelein met Christian Weber. The archives describe Weber clearly: a bouncer, a thug, and one of Adolf Hitler's earliest militant followers. He carried a riding crop as a weapon. It was his signature. Weber was obsessed with horses, but he was looking for more than just a rider. He saw the young, athletic Fegelein. He saw the hunger in his eyes. Why did Weber choose an uneducated groom? It seemed like a mismatch. But Weber needed a tool he could sharpen. He needed someone desperate for advancement who would follow orders without question. Weber opened the door. In April 1933, just months after Hitler seized total power, he sponsored Fegelein for the SS. Consider the shift. Fegelein was 26 years old. Reports state he was nearly illiterate. His future held only manual labor and obscurity. Then, overnight, he put on the black uniform. He was no longer a servant. He was a member of the elite. The new ideology gave him a simple instruction: you are superior. Not because of books or degrees, but because of blood. For Fegelein, the Nazi Party was not just politics. It was a liberation from social shame. He embraced it with fanaticism. But this was only the beginning. By 1934, Heinrich Himmler took notice. The Reichsführer SS controlled the entire police state, but he harbored a romantic obsession with the past. He loved horses. He believed the cavalry embodied the ancient Teutonic warrior spirit. Fegelein was the perfect poster boy for this delusion. Himmler appointed him head of the Reiter SS. It was a rapid ascent. Fegelein took charge of the facilities for the 1936 Berlin Olympics. Newsreels from the era record the scene, perfectly manicured courses, flags waving, the world watching. Fegelein didn't just manage the grounds, he tried out for the German Olympic equestrian team. He rode hard, he pushed the horses, but he failed. He was eliminated in the qualifying rounds. At first glance, a humiliating sporting defeat, but in reality, a massive career victory. The loss didn't matter, the exposure did. During the preparation, he solidified his bond with Himmler. The Reichsführer began to treat the former stable boy as a protege. Events accelerated. September 1939. The German army crossed the border into Poland. World War II began. Fegelein was ready. He commanded the SS Totenkopf Reiterstandarte, the Death's Head Horse Regiment. The footage from this period is jarring. While tanks and trucks rolled forward, Fegelein's men rode on horseback through the dust and smoke. They arrived in Warsaw shortly after the invasion concluded. The orders were stamped as security duties. This was a lie. The reality was extermination. Fegelein did not hesitate. He transitioned from an athlete to a commander of death squads. He participated in the system. 1,700 executions. That was the result of a single day's work. Fegelein's unit was not just fighting a war, they were participating in the systematic erasure of a nation. The targets were specific: Poland's intelligentsia, teachers, priests, doctors, lawyers. Anyone capable of organizing resistance was marked for death. December 7, 1939. The location was the Campinos forest. Fegelein's regiment gathered the prisoners. 1,700 human beings were lined up against the trees. The order was given. The sound of rifle fire echoed through the woods for hours. Fegelein watched the bodies pile up. But this was only the beginning. In March 1940, the tone changed. The Gestapo received disturbing reports. Fegelein and his men were not just killers, they were thieves. They were looting occupied Poland, stripping homes of money and luxury goods. Crates of stolen valuables were shipped back to Germany. It went deeper. Fegelein ordered arrests at the Warsaw prison not for security, but for profit. He extorted families. He executed those who could not pay. He even engaged in sexual relations with a Polish woman, a direct violation of the Nazis' strict racial laws. At first glance, an elite SS officer. But in reality, a corrupt criminal motivated by greed. Heinrich Himmler heard the details. He ordered a court-martial immediately. The charges were capital crimes, murder for personal gain, and severe moral turpitude. Under military law, Fegelein should have faced a firing squad. Why did he survive? The evidence was overwhelming. But Himmler intervened. He personally quashed the court-martial with a single direct order. The investigation vanished instantly. The files were closed. Fegelein walked away without a scratch. He faced no consequences. Himmler protected him for a simple reason. Fegelein was useful. He was charming, ruthless, and completely devoid of morality. He executed orders without hesitation or remorse. Himmler knew he needed men exactly like this for the horrors that were coming next. Events accelerated. May and June 1940. Fegelein joined the invasion of France. He served with the SS Verfügungstruppe, the unit that would become the Waffen-SS. The footage shows columns of German vehicles rolling through the French countryside. Fegelein's unit moved fast. For his service in the campaign, he received the Iron Cross Second Class. He pinned the medal to his uniform. But the war in the West was over. June 22, 1941. Operation Barbarossa began. The invasion of the Soviet Union commenced. July 19, 1941. On this date, a decorated officer crossed the line into mass murder. Hermann Fegelein commanded the 1st SS Cavalry Regiment. His forces smashed into Soviet territory with aggression, but the logistics failed immediately. Why did the cavalry struggle? The terrain was unforgiving. The horses collapsed from exhaustion within days. Men abandoned their mounts and climbed into trucks. Vehicles towed the artillery through the mud. It was a chaotic advance. But Heinrich Himmler had special plans for Fegelein. He did not need him for battle. He needed him for a massacre. Himmler assigned the regiments to Erich von dem Bach-Zelewski. The mission had a polite bureaucratic name: Systematic Combing of the Pripyat Marshes. This massive wetland in Belarus was supposedly a hideout for partisans, but the order was a lie. At first glance, a security operation, but in reality, a campaign of total extermination. Himmler's instructions were absolute. Eliminate the partisan threat. Eliminate every Jew who might support them. On July 28, 1941, Fegelein met with his superiors. The directive was monstrously specific. Shoot the men, drive the women and children into the marshes, drown them. Most commanders might have hesitated. Fegelein did not. He accepted the task without objection. In fact, witnesses reported he was eager to begin. July 30th, 1941, 7 in the morning. The operation launched. SS units swept through the villages. They dragged families from their homes, men, women, infants. The segregation was brutal. Soldiers forced the men to dig their own graves. The sound of shovels hitting the earth was replaced by gunfire. Bodies fell into the pits. But this was only the beginning. The women and children were marched at gunpoint toward the swamps. The plan relied on deep water. But the geography refused to cooperate. The marshes were shallow. The camera records, victims standing waist-deep in the muddy water. Mothers clutched babies above the surface. They cried. They shivered in the cold sludge. But they did not drown. They just stood there, terrified and alive. This stalled the operation. So, Fegelein's men adapted. They stopped trying to use the water. They raised their rifles. Soldiers opened fire directly into the crowd. Women holding infants were gunned down. Children clinging to their mothers fell into the reeds. The elderly who could not walk were shot on the bank. The water turned red. The SS Cavalry moved from village to village. They left a trail of corpses behind them. In one hamlet, they discovered a Jewish family hiding in a barn. The soldiers did not arrest them. They barred the doors. They struck a match. The structure burned to the ground with the family screaming inside. In another settlement, they rounded up 50 people. They shot them all. Bodies were thrown into a well. Soldiers shoveled dirt over the opening to hide the evidence. Heinrich Himmler monitored the reports from Berlin. On August 1st, he sent a telegram to Fegelein. The message was blunt. The numbers were too low. Not enough people were dying. Himmler demanded more bodies. Events accelerated. A few days later, Regimental Order No. 42 was issued. The rules tightened. All male Jews over 14, execute immediately. Women and children, shoot immediately. The attempt to drown them was abandoned as impractical. The bullet was faster. The footage shows officers marking maps crossing out entire villages. Fegelein's SS Cavalry Brigade became one of the first units in the Holocaust to systematically wipe out entire communities. They did not just kill soldiers, they erased families. The slaughter became routine. 14,178. That was the official count in the final report. Fegelein's cavalry swept through the Pripyat region like a scythe. They didn't just patrol the marshes, they hunted. The orders were absolute, total extermination. Soldiers kicked open doors in remote villages. Elderly Jews, too frail to walk, were dragged from their beds and shot on their own floorboards. The sound of rifles echoed inside the wooden houses. It did not stop there. Mothers clutching newborns were forced to the roadside. The pavement was cold. The executioners raised their weapons. Children as young as 2 or 3 were lined up against walls. Why did these men pull the trigger on toddlers? At first, the troops were not hardened killers. Some hesitated. Vomit stained the grass after the first executions, but Fegelein did not tolerate weakness. To him, mercy was synonymous with betrayal. He walked the lines, inspecting his troops. He rewarded the ruthless. He openly mocked anyone who looked away. The psychological transformation was rapid. Within weeks, the hesitation vanished. The killing became mechanical, efficient, soulless. On September 18, 1941, Fegelein sat at his desk and finalized the numbers. The ink was barely dry. His report listed 14,178 Jews killed, 1,001 partisans, 699 Red Army soldiers. On the other side of the ledger, 17 SS dead, 36 wounded, 3 missing. At first glance, a precise military operation. but in reality, a cover-up. Historians later uncovered the truth. Henning Pieper, an expert on SS Cavalry, analyzed the archives. He found what Fegelein hid. The real number was closer to 23,700. Men, women, children, babies, all dead because Heinrich Himmler gave an order, and because Hermann Fegelein was eager to obey. Berlin did not ask questions. Berlin applauded. Himmler promoted his favorite to SS Oberführer. The rank was equivalent to a brigadier general. Honors followed the blood. On March 2, 1942, the Knight's Cross was pinned to his collar. By December, oak leaves were added to the medal. The propaganda machine spun the narrative. They ignored the unarmed civilians in the ditches. They spoke only of aggressive leadership. The footage shows a smiling Fegelein shaking hands with high command. To the public, he was a brilliant cavalry commander. To the victims, he was a butcher. In April 1942, he took command of the 8th SS Cavalry Division, Florian Geyer. The mission remained the same: anti-partisan operations. In plain English, more burning villages, more dead civilians. But luck has a limit. The Eastern Front bites back. On December 21st and 22nd, 1941, Soviet snipers found their mark. Fegelein took a bullet but survived. He returned to the line. Then came September 1943. Another hit. The medical reports describe severe trauma. He was finished as a combat leader. He could no longer ride. He could no longer lead a charge. For most officers, this meant a desk job in a dusty archive, a quiet fade into obscurity until the war ended. But Fegelein was different. He had friends in high places. Heinrich Himmler looked at his injured protege and saw potential for something else. A new path opened, January 1st, 1944. On this date, the order came down from the very top. Hermann Fegelein received a new assignment. He packed his bags and moved directly into Adolf Hitler's headquarters. His new title was massive: Personal Liaison Officer to Heinrich Himmler. He was now the voice of the entire SS apparatus within the inner circle. For a man who began his life as a semi-illiterate stable boy, this was the absolute summit. He sat in the high-level briefings. He saw the secret maps. He stood shoulder to shoulder with the architects of the war. Fegelein understood one thing perfectly: how to exploit this access. Why did he succeed in such a dangerous place? The headquarters was filled with fanatics and sycophants. But Fegelein knew exactly how to play the game. He did not act like a stiff Prussian general. He was charming, he was loud, he was socially aggressive. Hitler's secretaries, Christa Schroeder and Traudl Junge, later testified to his impact. The footage shows Fegelein smiling, leaning in, dominating the room. He was popular with the women. He flirted openly. He cracked jokes while others stood at attention. At first glance, a dedicated officer. But in reality, a ruthless climber. While Hitler remained distant and cold during social gatherings, Fegelein brought noise and energy. He made sure to pour drinks for the right people. He targeted Martin Bormann, Hitler's powerful private secretary. They spent nights drinking together, cementing an alliance. Fegelein was honest about his motives. He told Traudl Junge that only two things mattered: his career and having fun. But this was only the beginning. Fegelein wanted total security. He set his sights on the Braun family. Eva Braun, the Führer's mistress, had a younger sister named Gretl. By 1944, Gretl was a problem. She was known for being extremely promiscuous. She slept with multiple soldiers. She caused public scenes. To make matters worse, she was pregnant with another man's child. Hitler needed a solution. He wanted to include Eva Braun in official functions, but protocol forbade it. He needed a cover story. A married sister would provide the necessary legitimacy for Eva to be present. The trap was set. Most men in the inner circle knew Gretl's reputation. They wanted nothing to do with her. Fegelein saw an opportunity where others saw a scandal. If he married Gretl, he became Hitler's brother-in-law. It was the ultimate shield. The connection would make him untouchable, placing him above even the SS hierarchy. He courted her. He ignored the pregnancy. Witnesses, including Eva herself, confirmed the truth. There was no romance. It was a cold calculation. The deal served everyone. Hitler got a solved domestic problem. Eva got social legitimacy. Fegelein got blood ties to the dictator, June 3, 1944. The wedding took place at the Mirabell Palace in Salzburg. The location was chosen carefully. It was far from the front lines. The sound of Allied bombing raids did not reach the ballroom. Adolf Hitler attended as the primary witness. Heinrich Himmler and Martin Bormann stood beside him. The photos show a lavish event. Uniforms were pressed, champagne flowed. It was a major social event for the Nazi elite. Eva Braun arranged every detail. She later expressed gratitude to Fegelein. Because of him, she could finally appear in public as the sister-in-law of an important SS general. She was somebody. The whole affair was a transaction. Love had nothing to do with it. Events accelerated rapidly. The celebration lasted only 6 weeks. On July the 20th, 1944, Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg walked into the Wolf's Lair headquarters in East Prussia. He carried a briefcase bomb. The explosion tore through the conference room. 4 people died. Hitler survived the blast. The party was over. 4 dead bodies lay on the floor. But the main target survived the blast. Hitler walked away from the wreckage with only minor injuries. Hermann Fegelein was standing right there. The explosion left a jagged piece of shrapnel in his left thigh. It was a small wound, a lucky escape. But for the conspirators, the luck ran out immediately. The reaction was instant. Hitler didn't just order arrests, he demanded a purge. Hundreds of German officers were dragged into cells. They were tortured, they were tried in show courts. Then came the execution rooms. The methods were medieval. Men were strung up on meat hooks using thin piano wire. They died slowly. The agony lasted for minutes. Fegelein didn't turn away. He developed a sick ritual. He carried a stack of photographs in his pocket. They showed the execution scenes in high detail, twisted faces, bodies dangling from steel hooks. He showed these images to guests at parties. The footage isn't there, but witnesses described it. Fegelein pointing at the dead men, laughing. He didn't just observe the terror, he savored it. Time jumped forward. By early 1945, the map of the Reich was shrinking. The Soviets crushed defenses in the east. Americans and British armored columns broke through the west. The war was lost. On January 16, 1945, Hitler retreated underground. He moved into the Führer bunker beneath the Reich Chancellery garden. Fegelein followed him. He was still Himmler's eyes and ears. But the bunker wasn't a command center. It was a concrete coffin, damp walls, the smell of unwashed bodies, and fear. Dim lights flickered constantly. Above their heads, the world was ending. Soviet artillery pounded Berlin day and night. The ground shook. The Nazi regime was twitching in its death throes. In this claustrophobic hole, Hermann Fegelein made a choice. He chose survival. While fanatics prepared to die with their Führer, Fegelein prepared to run. He didn't just pack a bag, he looted. He gathered stacks of German marks and foreign currency. He swept jewelry into his pockets, including pieces belonging to Eva Braun herself. He secured forged passports. Why did he think he could steal from the inner circle? He believed the chaos would cover his tracks. But he underestimated the paranoia of the bunker. His plan was simple. Reach Sweden or Switzerland, fade into the background, reinvent himself as a civilian after the war. April 20th, 1945, Hitler's birthday. The Soviets sent a gift. The first artillery shells hit central Berlin. Events accelerated. By April 21st, Red Army tanks were spotting the suburbs. By April 27th, the ring closed. The city was cut off. There was no way out. Then came the political blow. Heinrich Himmler played his hand. Behind Hitler's back, he contacted Count Folke Bernadotte of Sweden. He tried to cut a separate peace deal with the Western Allies. He offered Germany's surrender. The price? His own safety and a position of power. The Allies rejected the offer immediately, but secrets in Berlin had a short shelf life. On April 27th, a report landed on Hitler's desk. The news broke him. Hitler erupted. His faithful Heinrich was a traitor. The man he trusted for 2 decades had stabbed him in the back. Hitler screamed for an arrest, but Himmler was miles away, out of reach. The dictator needed a target. He needed to hurt someone close to the traitor. His eyes turned to the bunker staff. Where was Himmler's liaison? Where was Fegelein? The call went out on the evening of April 27th. No answer. Fegelein was nowhere to be found. He had abandoned his post without orders. He had deserted. In the paranoid air of the bunker, this wasn't just cowardice. It looked like confirmation. Fegelein was part of Himmler's conspiracy. Hitler didn't wait. He summoned SS Obersturmbannführer Peter Högel. Högel was a hunter, the deputy commander of the Reich Security Service. He knew Fegelein personally. They had worked together for years. Högel didn't need a map. He knew exactly where the liaison would hide. Högel took a squad and drove through the burning streets. He headed straight for Fegelein's private apartment in Charlottenburg. At first glance, a quiet residence, but in reality, a crime scene in progress. They kicked in the door. Fegelein was there. He wasn't in uniform. He was wearing civilian clothes. He was aggressively drunk. A suitcase lay open on the bed, half packed with stolen goods. The escape had failed. April 27, 1945. The SS squad kicked down the door of the Berlin apartment. Hermann Fegelein was not alone. A woman was with him. Reports vary on her identity. Some called her a mistress, others called her a prostitute. But the situation was clear. Fegelein was not in uniform. He was wearing civilian clothes. He was drunk. He was packing bags to flee the city. Johann Rattenhuber's deputy, Peter Högel, didn't hesitate. He arrested the deserter immediately. They dragged him out of the building, into the car, back to the Führer bunker. Fegelein stumbled, still intoxicated, unable to walk in a straight line. The drive was short. The bunker was cold. When the alcohol wore off, reality hit Fegelein like a physical blow. The fog cleared, and terror took its place. He realized the gravity of his mistake. He had deserted his post in the final hours of the Reich. Why did he think he could survive? He was family by marriage. He had influence. But Hitler knew about Heinrich Himmler's betrayal. Himmler had tried to negotiate surrender with the Allies, and Fegelein was Himmler's liaison officer. Guilt by association was automatic. Suspicion turned to certainty. Days earlier, Fegelein had tried to pass a briefcase to a chauffeur. Inside were cash, gems, and sensitive files. To Hitler, this wasn't just theft, it was treason. Was he selling secrets? Was he buying his life with state intelligence? In the paranoid atmosphere of the bunker, the answer was yes. Everything Fegelein did confirmed the dictator's fears. Eva Braun tried to stop the inevitable. She rushed to Hitler's quarters. Fegelein was her brother-in-law. Her sister, Gretl, was heavily pregnant. Eva begged for the father of the unborn child. She argued for family. She argued for mercy. Eyewitness accounts describe the scene. Eva's eyes are red and swollen from weeping. Her voice is desperate, but the dictator remained stone. He saw enemies everywhere. Himmler had betrayed him. Fegelein had deserted him. They were the same rot in the system. He saw a conspiracy to abandon him in his darkest hour. Hitler ordered an immediate court-martial. SS Brigadeführer Wilhelm Mohnke presided. Generals Rattenhuber, Krebs, and Bergdorf sat as judges. The process was swift. Fegelein faced charges of desertion and treason. Mohnke, despite his fanatical loyalty, attempted to follow military protocol. He argued that the evidence for treason was circumstantial. He suggested a different punishment: send Fegelein to the front lines, let him die fighting for the Chancellery. Perhaps Hitler's rage would cool. At first glance, a military tribunal, but in reality, a death sentence. Hitler had no patience for legalities. He demanded blood. He ordered Fegelein stripped of everything: the Knight's Cross, the oak leaves, the swords, the rank of general. In seconds, the high commander became a Schütze, a private, the lowest form of soldier. It was the ultimate humiliation before the end. Then came the final command: execute him immediately. April 28th, midday. The guards marched the prisoner up the concrete stairs, out of the bunker, into the garden of the Reich Chancellery. The footage shows a landscape of total destruction: craters from Soviet shells, shattered trees, dust hanging thick in the air. The Soviet artillery was pounding the district. Amidst the explosions, Fegelein was pushed against a wall, or perhaps a pile of debris. Accounts vary on the executioners. Some say a squad of 4 SS soldiers. Others say Högel pulled the trigger himself. There was no turning back. Fegelein was given no opportunity for final words. There was no blindfold, no ceremony. This wasn't a military execution with dignity. This was murder dressed up as justice. The order was given. The rifles cracked. Multiple bullets tore through his chest and head. He collapsed. The SS officer, who less than 48 hours earlier had been drinking in his apartment, confident he would escape, was dead. His body fell onto the rubble, just another corpse among thousands in the ruins of Berlin. The sound of the shots was instantly swallowed by the roar of distant mortars. Fegelein's body was never formally buried. A shell crater became his tomb. Some witnesses claim the guards threw the body into a jagged hole in the earth and hastily shoveled dirt over the uniform. Others suggest they left him where he fell, exposed on the surface. It made little difference. The garden was soon consumed by firestorms from Soviet artillery. When the Red Army captured the Chancellery complex days later, the investigation began. Forensic teams sifted through the debris. They found dozens of charred corpses among the ruins. But identification was impossible. Fegelein's remains were never recovered. There is no grave. There is no stone. Only the dry testimony of the executioners confirms he died on April 28th. Why does the date matter? It creates a haunting historical irony. Hermann Fegelein was executed on April 28, 1945. Just hours later, the atmosphere in the bunker shifted. In the early morning of April 29th, Adolf Hitler finally married Eva Braun. The registry was signed in the underground conference room. If the execution had waited 24 hours, Fegelein would have died as the Führer's official brother-in-law. Instead, he died merely as a traitor. Events accelerated. On April 30th, Hitler and Eva committed suicide together. Their bodies burned in the same garden, perhaps only yards from where Fegelein's corpse lay hidden. The men who killed him did not survive long enough to celebrate. Peter Högel, the man who arrested Fegelein and likely pulled the trigger, tried to escape the city on May 2nd. He reached the Weidendammer Bridge. But Soviet encirclement was complete. A bullet struck him in the head. He died on the pavement. Generals Hans Krebs and Wilhelm Burgdorf, the judges at Fegelein's court-martial, chose a quieter exit. They remained in the bunker. On May 2nd, they drank cyanide. But the story did not end with death. May 5th, 1945, exactly 1 week after the execution, Gretl Braun gave birth to a baby girl. She named the child Eva Barbara Fegelein in honor of her late aunt. Hermann never knew. He died in total ignorance. He did not know the gender of the child. He did not know if Gretl would survive the falling shells. He knew only that his desperate attempt to save his own skin had failed. The daughter he never met faced a tragic destiny. Eva Barbara Fegelein lived in the shadow of the war. In April 1971, her boyfriend died in a car accident. She could not bear the grief. She committed suicide at the age of 26. This happened almost exactly 30 years after her father's execution. Gretl survived. She inherited her sister Eva's jewelry, remarried in 1954, and lived until 1987. So who was Hermann Fegelein? At first glance, a charming, high-ranking officer. But in reality, a butcher. Was he a war criminal who deserved the death penalty? Absolutely. The archives confirm the scale of the horror. His cavalry units murdered over 17,000 people in the Pripyat Marshes alone. Some estimates reach 23,700. The reports are clear. Most victims were Jewish civilians. Women and children were driven into the freezing swamps and shot. Fegelein did not just follow Himmler's orders, he amplified them. He looted occupied territories. He murdered prisoners for personal profit. He carried photographs of executed men in his pocket and showed them like trophies. By any moral standard, Fegelein was a monster. He should have faced a tribunal and a hangman for crimes against humanity. But was the shot in the Chancellery garden justice? No, it was simply rage. Hitler did not kill him for the massacres in Belarus. Hitler had ordered those massacres. Fegelein was executed for desertion. He died because he tried to run when the ship was sinking. Thus ended the life of a man who served the regime's cruelty only to be consumed by its final panic. 2 bursts of automatic fire. That was the sound of the end for Hermann Fegelein. Hitler could tolerate failure, but he could not tolerate personal betrayal. To the dictator, the war was not lost on the battlefield. It was lost by traitors in the bunker. Fegelein's execution had nothing to do with justice for his thousands of victims. It was strictly about Hitler's wounded ego. He needed to punish someone, anyone. Himmler was out of reach negotiating with the West, so Fegelein became the proxy, the scapegoat. The order was given. The guards dragged him into the Chancellery garden. The air smelled of concrete dust and burning archives. If Fegelein had stayed at his post, history might have been distorted. Apologists would have painted him as a faithful soldier. They would have claimed he stood by his leader until the very end, crushing the cyanide capsule with dignity. He could have been remembered as a man of honor. But Fegelein did not stand. He ran. The SS search team kicked down the door of his Berlin apartment. The scene inside was pathetic. Fegelein lay on a bed dressed in civilian clothes. He was drunk. His eyes were glazed. Beside him sat a suitcase stuffed with cash and stolen jewelry. In the frame, a man stripped of his uniform and his mask. He revealed his true nature, a coward, an opportunist with zero principles. He would have betrayed his own mother to save his skin. How did an illiterate stable boy become an SS general? He had no military education. He could barely read a tactical map. But he possessed a different talent. Fegelein knew how to flatter. He charmed the powerful. He married into Hitler's inner circle. That was his ticket. He traded horses for tanks and a riding crop for a command over thousands. But this was only the beginning. At first glance, a decorated officer with the Knight's Cross. But in reality, a butcher with no conscience. The Nazi machine did not punish brutality. It demanded it. Look at the progression of his career. Every atrocity became a stepping stone. In Poland, his unit slaughtered civilians. The result? A promotion. In the Campinos forest, 1,700 people were executed. The reward? Another medal. Himmler personally intervened to drop charges of looting. The message was clear. Ruthlessness was the currency of the Reich. The more you killed, the faster you rose. Fegelein understood the rules perfectly. He drove thousands of Jews into the Pripyat Marshes. The orders were simple: drown them or shoot them. The water turned red. Women and children were not collateral damage, they were targets. In Belarus, villages burned to the ground. The camera records, smoke rising from thatch roofs, bodies lying in the mud. Partisans were shot without trial, intellectuals were hunted in the forests. None of these victims saw a courtroom. Fegelein did not die for them. He died because he was inconvenient. He was executed for political reasons, simply for being connected to Himmler at the wrong moment. But the injustice went deeper. Fegelein was executed, yet many of his colleagues survived. Some vanished into South America with new identities. Others found protection from Allied intelligence services. They traded secrets for freedom. Men with blood on their hands lived out their days in comfort. They died in warm beds, surrounded by grandchildren, never facing a tribunal. Fegelein's execution in the ruined garden was not a moral victory. It was just gangsters killing gangsters. Here is what we must remember about Hermann Fegelein. He represents a specific breed of monster, the ambitious climber with no moral compass. He was not a fanatic. He did not read ideological manifests. He joined the SS because it paid better than the stables. He killed Jews not out of passion, but because it pleased his superiors. If the British had offered him a promotion, he would have worn their uniform. If the Soviets had offered him power, he would have marched for them. He was a hollow man, an empty vessel filled with greed. And in the end, that greed left him bleeding on the soil of the Reich Chancellery. Thus ended the career of the opportunist.